Speaking of Caitlin Clark, we'll end with her. The just the
Her.
yeah, just I mean, she is her.
Yes, yes.
Like
Yeah.
if you want to put it that way. The Caitlin Clark effect, and Angel Reese's name will obviously come up here. The Caitlin Clark effect in 2024. I mean, Time Athlete of the Year is probably like an interesting starting point, but
Yes.
and the quotes she had there resonated. There were a lot of people who claim to be diehard fans of hers who disagreed with some of her stances on things and think that she's been bent into a different position or whatever the case may be. But ultimately, what does this look like in 2025, Maria? Like, is what I'm interested in, because there's a case right now that she is currently the most famous basketball player in the country. It's not to say she's lifetime more popular than LeBron James, but it feels
Right.
like more people are curious about her right
Mhm.
now just because LeBron's been in our lives for so long, Steph Curry's been in our lives for so long. She's new, and that's why this is like interesting as being part of it. But and also from a basketball standpoint, like I'm gonna give you some numbers here. This was a big thing about her rookie season before
Right.
the break, because people got to remember, when you're drafted into the WNBA, you go right into the WNBA. Like there's no off season or whatever. Like you're in
The
camp.
draft is a week after the national championship game. It's a week after.
Yes, and then you're in camp. You got to relocate. It's chaotic. So, Caitlin Clark before the break, and there was an Olympic break last year.
Yeah.
So this is the break I'm referring to. 17 points per game, 8 assists, about 6 rebounds,
Hmm.
bunch of turnovers both before and
Right.
after the break. That's a conversation for another day, but shot 40, 33, 89 splits. And her points per game jumped by 6. After the break, it was 23. The assists jumped from 8 to about 9. The rebounds are a slight drop off, but rebounds are rebounds. She's a point guard. The turnovers are still at 5.6. That's a lot. Might
Hmm.
might want to cut that one down.
Hmm.
But the shooting percentages, from 40 to 43, from 33 from 3 to 37 on about 10 3-point attempts per game. The free throws even went up from 89 to 93. You saw a different player. And then in the playoffs, she struggled, but that was like the worst matchup possible for her in Connecticut.
Hmm.
What does this look like in year 2? On the court, off the court, the Caitlin Clark experience.
Okay. Let's start with Time Athlete of the Year because
Yeah.
you mentioned that first. And I just have to say that I was extremely impressed with the interview. And, Caitlin Clark has been choosy about opening herself up to these types of interviews. And I really attribute that to her just being extremely focused about being a ball player, and I think that maybe caused some unrest among fans over the course of the season where they're like, is she not aware of what's going on in social media? Is she not aware of some of these, you know, um, vitriolic forms of discourse? And truth be told, I actually envy her and idolize the fact that she is able to block out social media and she stays off social media. I think a lot of people's mental health would be better if they weren't on social media so much and getting sucked into
Agree.
some dangerous discourse. Now, that being said, I've always felt that she always said the right things. And like, if you're not satisfied with what Caitlin has been saying on both sides, whether you think she's saying too much or not saying enough, I think that says more about you than it does about her. I don't think she's a controversial person. She said that in the Time piece, and I think it's really true. And people react to what she says so viciously. No matter what she says,
Yeah.
there are people that are going to spin it and turn it into something controversial when it's really not all that controversial. Like, I just have to say, when I saw people upset about her acknowledging that white privilege exists, I don't get that. Like, it's not like she was apologizing. She didn't say, I'm sorry for being white. She just literally said, there is white privilege, period. That's it. She's not saying that that's why she's gotten all this attention. I think she's just acknowledging that it's a factor. But look, let's be clear. What Caitlin has done on the court has been undeniable and unprecedented. And that is the main reason why she has captivated a nation. because when you have something like a, you're chasing a 50 plus year record, a Division One scoring record for men and women by Pete Maravich, who's a legendary name and player. Something like that is extremely newsworthy, and it made all of her games like must watch. And it started with, prior to that, her breaking the NCAA women's record. And what was so great about that record chase was not only were we, privy to watching Caitlin, this generational talent, and learning more about other players, including her teammates and her opponents, we also learned along the way about other players in the history of the game. And that's what's so cool about like a record chase like that. You actually learn more about the history. And somebody like a Lynette Woodard suddenly got flowers that she had never gotten before because people
Mhm.
didn't acknowledge her before. This gave us an excuse to learn about these great players. I think people forget about that. So that happened. And then you couple that with the incredible, the viewership, the attendance. Let's not forget, I think it was 56,000 people went to an Iowa preseason game before last college season. Like, was that not already going to be a clue of like how big this thing was going to get? And then you mentioned, the you talk about the attendance records and teams moving to bigger arenas and all these things that happened. But then the on court stuff. Okay, yeah, like she had her rookie struggles for sure. The first month or so of the season, had an extremely, and I mean like historically difficult schedule. I think the WNBA like panicked a little bit with that schedule. They were like, let's put as many Caitlin Clark games as possible so that we can
S-
make sure that people are watching. And I think they overdid it,
Still,
frankly.
still won Rookie of the Year almost unanimously.
It's not like Caitlin is not deserving for what she is doing on the court for some of these accolades, but the off court stuff and the impact for sure is why it garners a recognition like a Time Athlete of the Year.
The processing was different. The just using screens to her advantage from a basketball standpoint also, and was just getting better at creating her shot as the season went along. Look more comfortable. I still think a lot was put on her on the offense, which is why, like, even if you look at her college career, like she's
Mm-hmm.
turned the ball over a lot, but that's because her usage is
Yeah.
also very high. So I wonder what that's going to look like if they fill out the roster better. And then off the court, you mentioned the Time interview, and so did I. The quote that got people up in arms, which pretty benign, but this is part of the effect and the experience that I want to
Yeah.
touch on briefly before we get out of here. Her quote, the money quote, so to speak. I want to say I've earned every single thing, but as a white person, this is her talking. There is privilege. Clark told Time a lot of those players in the league that have been really good have been black players. This
Mm-hmm.
league has kind of been built on them. The more we can appreciate that, highlight that, talk about that, and then continue to have brands and companies invest in those players that have made this league incredible, I think it's very important. I have to continue to try to change that. The more we can elevate black women, that's going to be a beautiful thing.
I just think that when you read back what she's saying, I just
Yes.
don't see that as controversial. I just don't
But,
see it.
but if you are from a certain part of the country or think a certain way or from a certain neighborhood, like there are, like, to me and you, rational people who are like fair-minded and all these different things, like, and are pro what Caitlin Clark is talking about here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna look at that and be like, yeah, absolutely, we agree that should be done. But there are other people who are racist who are not
Yeah.
gonna
I
see
mean,
it that way. This is what Jonquel Jones had been talking about, and this was an appearance on the Pivot, and she also tweeted about this. I think a lot of the fans, the Caitlin Clark fans, I think they wanted to latch on to Caitlin Clark and then use her as this fuel to be able to be the way that they wanted to be, is what
mhm.
she told Ryan Clark. And I think that that's why there was such a big backlash when she liked the whole Taylor Swift post saying that Taylor Swift was going to vote for Kamala Harris.
Mhm.
And Caitlin Clark liked it, and there was people commenting on Caitlin Clark's page like, "Hey, you shouldn't have chose a side. We're not going to support you anymore." Da, 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 da. Back to the Jonquel Jones quote, because they want her as in Caitlin, to be a representation of their racism and their view on the world, and she's not like that. And she continued, and I think you have to be careful when you say the Fever fans, because I don't think it's just Fever fans. I think it's people that wanted Caitlin Clark to be a certain type of way. They thought that she was. And so they became Caitlin Clark fans, basically assuming that she was that way. And now they've realized, oh no, she's not actually racist. As Jonquel
Right.
Jones said about Caitlin Clark, which I think was an interesting way to put it. It doesn't seem like, to Jonquel Jones' point, she's what some of her core fans want her to be.
I also just think a huge problem today, and particularly on social media, is that people want you to pick a side.
On
And
everything. Yeah.
sometimes there isn't a side. Sometimes it's okay to be down the middle, to be reasonable, to be moderate in your opinion. And I just think that what Caitlin said is, not extreme in one way or the other. She's not apologizing for who she is. She's not saying she's undeserving. She is uplifting others, which is okay to do. It doesn't have to always be, well,
Right.
I'm the one who did this. Like that's arrogant. And so I just think that sometimes people they nitpick and they really overthink and manipulate these things because they're trying to fit into a side rather than just accepting for what it is, which sometimes isn't a side. And I certainly think you can be a fan of a player and what they do, even if you don't identify with their political leaning. And also to assume everything based on what you like on social media, it's just like it's bogus.
It's
Like,
2025. That's what it
and
is.
so and that's why I actually think that Caitlin has been smart about not just, she doesn't just talk, and she is careful and selective, because I think she wants to make sure if she's going to put her opinions out there, that it's in a forum that's going to be allowing her to really explain and get into things. And I just was, like I said, just super impressed by the
Yeah.
timepiece, and I thought that she addressed everything with a lot of clarity, a lot of sense, just common sense.
And she's smart. She's hyper aware that her words mean something, which is why I don't think. And there was a time, like earlier in the year, when all the shit was going on with Dejanay Carrington, and then her
Mhm.
fans were attacking Dejanay Carrington, and I was like, she being Caitlin, she should probably say something about this at some point.
Mhm.
And because her fans are going crazy, but and she did eventually, because she was asked about it. And I
Mhm.
think with Jonquel Jones pointing out, like, listen, she's not that way.
Mhm.
A lot of people got mad at that too, but I mean,
People are always going to get mad. Like I said,
that's part of it too.
no one's ever going to be 100%. 100% of people aren't always going to be satisfied with, no matter what someone does. But going back to kind of taking it back to like on the court, like
Yeah,
I think it's not, I'm not saying anything groundbreaking here, but I also think that just the style of play that Caitlin embodies was something that we had never seen before. And that's also what sort of catapulted her into, oh, have you seen that girl that pulls up from the logo and has the audacity to like shoot threes like Steph Curry, and also is leading, the NCAA in assists, and like, ends up coming into the W and is leading the W in assists. Like that style of play was it was captivating. And it's not saying that any of these other great players aren't. That there are a lot of captivating things. I just think that it was a swirl of all these different factors coming together. And certainly the newness of what she was doing was, became a must watch phenomenon.
yeah. In summary, what I think this is going to look like is she'll be top 5 in scoring. She was close this year as a rookie. I didn't think the scoring would be there right away, and it wasn't until it was, and it was. So I think she'll be top 5 in scoring. I think she'll be top 5 in assists. She might be first in assists, for being honest. She will. I think the percentages will be better. She'll be a top 5 MVP candidate. The Fever should be back in the playoffs. They'll make moves to try to, like, around her. And then off the court, I still think she's going to have a wealth of support. I hope that her fans aren't as with some of the fans, because some of the
Yeah,
fans, this is not a representation of all Caitlin Clark fans,
sure.
but I hope that some of the like super extreme ones are maybe less so now that she says some things, and we could really focus on to tie this all together, how her game is growing, along with how the league is growing, along with how the league's players are growing,
Yeah.
and how everything is just sort of moving forward.